But it seems to me that we're fighting about the wording in charters. The real issue is the survival of our church. This gentleman brought up something that's the most critical issue I have heard. We have inter-religious marriages. If you go to our churches today,
speak in the mic.
If you go to our churches today, you see a lot of non-Greek people there. It seems to me foolish. There are 6,000 Greek people, 2,000, that's even less, is going to rule a church to the destruction of our church. This church should be the Orthodox Church of North and South America. Not the Greek Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Church. And this is the real issue that we are going to fight for, is the survival of our church. That's what we're talking about. Forget these charters. This is subterfuge from them to control and get us back into the old Greek religion. That isn't going to happen anymore. Times have gone by us, and it's time to do our own thing.
First, the gentleman from St. Alamo said a good point. It's up to everybody to read the two charters and compare them. And I think there's two issues. One is the charters are important. Because the charter and the UPR, the Uniform Parish Regulations, are important because they are rules and regulations of how we are governed. Now, the other issue that as two gentlemen mentioned about the Orthodox Church in America, yeah, that's another issue, and that's important, but that's another issue. I think the immediate issue is, are rules and regulations to be obeyed? Are they to be what were agreed upon over the past 80 years? By the Patriarch, by the archbishops, by clergy and laity, and by priests. Are they to be followed or just to be ignored? We have 80 years of accumulated history of rules and regulations being adopted. And the 1977 charter is the latest charter. There are rules that were adopted and agreed upon. Now, are they to be sort of ignored? New rules to be imposed without input. And I think that's what's important. With this new charter, if you were to look at it in terms of who the power accrues to, you've got laity, you've got the bishops, the metropolitans, you've got the archbishop. You will notice by reading it that the eparchal synod now has the bulk of the power.
That's a very good observation.
And what you will have is each metropolis, each metropolitan, having his own little, basically, local jurisdiction or little kingdom. And how will that affect the national institutions? Well, the national institutions are going to suffer. Whether it's St. Basil, whether it's a seminary, or other programs, they're going to suffer. What's going to happen is money will go from the parishes to the local metropolis, and if they decide, how much money will go to the national diocese. And what will happen? Yeah, the national institution will suffer. In fact, they're suffering. You can see the effects right now, and it will just increase in the future. I just want to read one section.
Go ahead.
If I...
You go ahead. Go ahead.
I've got time.
Certainly.
Yeah, you're on a roll.
Oh, man.
Besides, they've got any gray hair.
Go ahead.
Let me just...
Take your time.
Go ahead. Let me hold this for you.
Yeah. So 2 points. In the 1977 charter, the term legislative is referred to twice in reference to the Archdiocesan Council as meaning having interim legislative authority between clergy and laity congresses. That term doesn't appear in the new charter. Well, that's a key term. In the new charter, you see clergy and laity has advisory, consultative authority. That's meaningless. Unless you have legislative authority, you have nothing. So that's an important term that needs to be brought up in the new charter. And then the one other thing I just want to read, if you could hold this. It's Article 20 of the new proposed charter, discussing ministries and institutions. All major existing or future institutions of the Archdiocese shall be property of the Archdiocese. while those of a local nature shall be the respective property of each local ecclesiastical administration. The establishment of new institutions, including but not limited to educational, recreational, charitable, retirement homes, and the like, as well as the dissolution of such institutions, requires prior approval of the Eparchal Synod and the consent of the Archdiocesan Council or the local council, as may be applicable. Well, it's not clear here, but you can see what it leads to. Local institutions, or the metropolitan, is going to basically, money from the local parishes will be kept within the local metropolis. Money going to the national level will die out. And so that you will have, in fact, you will probably have metropolises incorporating within the state of Illinois, the state of Arizona, California. So now that instead of having just a national archdiocese incorporating within the state of New York, you will now have 8 metropolises incorporating. Well, what's the purpose of that?
Just one thing, and that is that the lawsuit that the 31 plaintiffs filed and that's being supported financially by OCL focuses in on only one particular thing, and that's the amendment procedures of the charter. It's the only issue that is being litigated. Under the 77 charter, you have to have this cooperation between both sides in order to amend it. Under the new charter, that no longer exists. Under the new charter, the Eparchal Synod, I think, is the one that makes that suggests the changes to the charter. And I think that the one thing that we ought to understand is you can look, as Tom has suggested, you can read the 2 charters side by side. I think OCL is the only one that's published them side by side, so it's easy to compare them. And you can look at the minutiae and the changes. But the most important thing is the amendment provision. Because if you don't like this charter, just wait till you get the next one. Because if you accept the idea that it can be changed unilaterally by the Patriarchate, that this is a gift from the Patriarchate, and the Patriarchate can give you whatever charter the Patriarchate wants, just wait until you see the next one. That's my comment.
That's why I want to close on this point. That's why we want to encourage dialogue and discussion. Remember, the charter that was discussed at the 2002 clergy lady was kept in secret. It was because 100 communities asked for it to be circulated. It should have been circulated in the first instance. So what we're just asking is openness and transparency. You can vote or not vote for it. You can be for it or not, but I think it's a very bad thing for a church in particular, our own church, to get into this habit of secretiveness, of doing things. In the 1970s, 7 or 8 people used to stand in front of the Kremlin, right? The great Russian professor Sakharov, right? His wife, Yelena Bonner, Father Gleb Yakunin, who was the last Russian Orthodox priest to go to jail. It was a show trial, and he went to jail. And so these used to come, they used to light kirya candles, and they would walk in front of the Kremlin, and they'd get beat up, and they'd lose their jobs. Now, I'm not imputing that the Patriarch in the Synod is the Kremlin. I'm just trying to make the comparison, between entrenched what's the word? Mindset. And there, thank you, George. An entrenched mindset. Everyone said, all of us. I mean, I worked in government then, and we would write letters to the Russian embassy and to Brezhnev, and people said, "Oh, you're blowing in the wind." Like that wall fell in Berlin, didn't it? Nobody predicted it, did they? No one predicted that the Soviet system would fall so quickly, and it did. And I think that what we're doing here is lighting the candles. We're doing the best we can, and because we think that we have right in our side.